another episode of Social Workers Matter, SWM. I almost forgot that. Happy New Year again. This is the second episode for 2023, and I am joined by two wonderful women, Carissa and Paula. Good morning, ladies.
Morning, morning.
Are you two awake or what? Is it too early in the morning for you?
No.
So welcome to SWM, and thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy days, I know, to join us, to share with us some of the important work that you're doing. And I think we should start really by both of you introducing yourselves. Cassia, perhaps you can go first. I'm going to let you go first because Paula turned up second, so I'll let her go second.
Okay.
So Cassia, share with us who you are and something about your current role.
So my name is Cassia. I'm a trainee clinical psychologist in my final year at Lancaster University. I'm currently involved in the EEC circles due to having an innovative placement where we're basically allowed to have a say in if we feel like there's been a gap in our learning across the 3 years. If there's an area of interest, we kind of say, oh, this is something I'm interested in, and get back to the course. And then they look into it, and all of that happened, and now I'm here. I think also it's probably in line with my thesis. I'm exploring racial trauma and the high rates of psychosis within the Black Caribbean community. And I did notice that there was a lot of awareness since the Black Lives Matter movement of racial trauma and how racism affects the Black community, but not really a lot of interventions and psychological models that are tailored for the Black community. So I think that probably led me to being interested in EEC. And my kind of non-informal mentor, Isaac, was the equality and diversity lead at the time at the Maudsley. So we kind of linked together, and he thought that this would be a really beneficial project for me to be involved in. And now I'm here with Paula.
Well, thank you, Cassia. Thank you for that comprehensive overview of your current role and how you've come to be here. So obviously, even in terms of your research interests, sounds extremely pertinent. Paula,
Yes.
over to you.
Yes.
How are you and who are you?
How am I? I'm great. I'm just enjoying the sun rays this morning. It's lovely.
Nice.
Yeah, for a cold February morning. It's nice. So my name's Paula Ange, and I'm a counselling psychologist, and my background is originally in CAMS. I started my career in child and adolescent mental health, and I've worked in pretty much every kind of area of CAMS. So I've worked in generic CAMS, which is just assessment and treatment, tier 3 CAMS, tier 2 CAMS, which is more primary care and doing some early intervention work and groups with mothers and looking for kind of young people who may need neurodevelopmental assessments for ASD and ADHD, trying to catch them early. And then moving into working with looked after children and working with foster carers, as well as doing what we called at that time was MST, which is multi-systemic therapy, being part of the pilot study of that in Hackney, and working with intensively with parents trying to keep young people out of care and custody, and then after MST, I made a bit of a career move, half-time in CAMS and half-time in adults, working more systemically, because I've always loved working systemically. It always worked really well in CAMS, and so my time was split working with adults with psychosis and doing family therapy where a loved one had a diagnosis of psychosis, and it was very similar in many ways to CAMS work, where someone's, often the identified client is being blamed for all the family problems. In a similar way, the child who's acting up is being blamed for all the family problems, but working systemically really helps to unpick some of those family dynamics, family stories and narratives about what happened, and just really supporting families to function more holistically, and to support each other as a whole, as opposed to having a blame story.
Sure, that makes absolute sense. Well, I'm going to come back to you really, because these EECs, I came across them when I think you and colleagues attended a kind of a reflective event that we had at the Tavistock, and your team had the floor really to sort of share details of the work and what it was about. So what I'd like really is for you to do the same here, just to tell us a bit about, firstly, what does EEC stand for? And tell us a bit about where it came from and what it is.
Actually, EEC stands for Emotional Emancipation Circles. And it originates in America, in the US, and EECs were set up as part of community engagement. So the idea about having an EEC was really to support communities in the US to talk about racial trauma. And to think about how a community could respond to it, and also to be united in that conversation, as opposed to just supporting individuals. Because when someone experiences racial trauma, whether it's a microaggression or more overt kind of publicized killing or attack, the whole community suffers. And EECs, the Association of Black Psychologists, thought about how they could respond to this in a way to support Black communities with these traumas. And that's how EECs were set up. And the EEC program is really looking at Black ancestry and all the good things about hailing from the African diaspora, and all the good things that have come out of that, and also how to respond to the stresses of being part of the African diaspora in today. Because one of the heritages of being of African ancestry, of course, is the transatlantic slave trade. And the remnants of that, people believe that Black people from Africa, from the African diaspora, are inferior to those who are of white heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that's a lie, but we also suffer from the discrimination and racism that comes from this belief system today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's demonstrated day after day of Black people, Black men in particular, being killed, and that public act of brutality which happened for George Floyd happened at a time when the world was still, and the world could see that this injustice should not be happening. In the Black community, we know that it happens because we experience racism in microaggressions, in acts of discrimination, in being overlooked, in being brought to tribunal more quickly than our white counterparts, that these expressions of racism are still alive and well for us, and we have to navigate this on a daily basis. And what EECs wanted to address was the being able to negotiate those dynamics at work, and to bring your whole self to work, because one of the difficulties is that as a Black person, you have to present in a way which is acceptable to, I guess, white counterparts, which means oftentimes bringing less of yourself, or in some ways manipulating parts of your heritage, whether it's the way you speak, whether it's the way you look, whether it's the way you might want to express yourself. We have learnt to adapt and to become more, I guess, socially acceptable in our workplaces, so that we face less racism. Or,
all right, Paula, let me just ask you to pause there for a moment. Just pause there for a moment, because obviously we'll get more into some of what the work is in terms of the current context. I think that's a bit where you're moving to. I just wanted to bring Cassia into to sort of explain to us why you have become involved in it. You're a trainee psychologist. Even in terms of what you shared about your proposed thesis and your research interests, it sounds as though this is definitely a path that's going to be useful for you academically, but I guess also professionally. What is it that piqued your interest about this particular program?
Yeah, definitely. I think when I think of my motivation, it's possibly has a personal and professional context, in terms of, I think when I think about maybe my upbringing with my parents. So my mother is from Aruba, just off the coast of Venezuela, and my dad is Dominican.
Are you serious? Are you serious?
Are we cousins?
We probably are. Anyway, carry on, Cassia. We'll talk about that another day.
And I think it's really interesting, because I was thinking about kind of their parenting model of, we almost had like a dual curriculum of going to school and learning about Henry VIII, and then coming home and having more teaching about Nelson Mandela, and it was very empowering. And there was a lot of pride there. I felt really fortunate to be Black as a child. And I think when times have been quite difficult for me, I've been able to fall on that. Knowing who I am, where I've come from, has definitely given me strength. When similar to like what Paula was saying about the lies have have been told, and I'm in a situation, especially on the clinical training, where I definitely am the minority. I'm the only Black person in my cohort of 32. And a lot of the time, I think since the Black Lives Matter movement, there's a lot of conversations around anti-racism practice and what that looks like. And maybe now talking about racism in a way that us Black people have really always spoken about it, but now it feels like that's spilling over into professional spheres. And I think at times that can be quite intense and challenging. I think those kind of resources that my parents kind of gave me has definitely helped me through those conversations and racism that I've experienced myself. But professionally, I thought, how is it possible I could spend 3 years training to be a clinical psychologist and not really learn about non-Westernized approaches? But I'm going back to Hackney, a really diverse area, and I want to be working with my own community. That was my motivation getting into the profession. But then I thought, apart from the tree of life, narrative therapy, and a bit of mindfulness, I don't really feel like I've got anything in my toolbox. So yeah, that was my motivation. I wanted to incorporate an African-centered approach to my clinical training journey, not just wait till I get to the end. And I think I feel very fortunate that I think my university is very on board with focusing on diversity in the context of research, hence my thesis that I spoke about earlier, my clinical practice, supporting me in being able to have this placement that I think would have been unheard of just 5 years ago in the world of clinical psychology. Everybody would be saying, well, what's the evidence base for it, and and scrutinizing it. So the fact that they've kind of welcomed it with open arms, and it's not pathologizing, it's not medical modelized, it's just community focused, I think really speaks volumes. But I must also say, I know that that's not all the courses. So we've come a long way in the clinical psychology curriculum, but we have a really long way to go. I also don't want to give the impression that we're where we need to be, because we're not quite there yet.
Absolutely. Okay, so thanks for that, Cassia. Paula, I'm still going to ask you to hold off what you were about to launch into, because what I'm also wondering is whether the link and association with the US has been helpful in terms of even what Cassia was just sharing. What's your view about that? Because I know that there is a very strong Afro or African-centric psychology that I know from some years ago visited the Tavistock with with let's say, it ruffled a few feathers, put it that way. But have you felt that link and that connection has been useful in terms of our situation here in the UK?
Yes. Yeah, I do think it's been helpful. We do have a UK branch now of
yes, Cassia was saying, she mentioned it before you arrived.
Yes, and so our clinical supervisor is a psychologist who is part of the Black Association of Black Psychologists. So the link has been extremely helpful. What it's allowed to happen is to, I guess, for us in the organisation I work for, to get the material already formatted,
Yes.
and then anglicize it. So there are some videos in there that are American stars that we may not, baseball stars that we may not be familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And we've kind of taken those out and put in people that we do know, like Stormzy, putting people like we've just done a bit of a, I wouldn't say and because it's copywritten, there's only so much we can change. So we've done that, but I think that's been very helpful. So we did that before we kind of presented it to our workforce and the purpose that we use it for. There are other community organizations who use the more Americanized slides.
Mm.
And
Okay.
and that is their choice.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so thanks for that, because I mean, I think in a way, it is useful to have a bit of a template, but it's also even more useful to use material that people will be familiar with in the UK.
Yeah.
What before we move on to really think a little more about how the groups work and how it was that your organization sort of adopted the whole concept, if they have, of course.
Yeah.
What do you think? You see, one of the things I guess I struggle with sometimes, because I'm quite involved with colleagues. We work and we do sort of anti-racist practice groups and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And I'm always mindful of the position of Black staff who may be in those groups.
Mm.
And a lot of the material seems to be aimed at our white colleagues, because obviously they have a lot of work to do. But I'm becoming increasingly concerned about, well, where do Black colleagues sit within those kind of mixed groups, where it feels as though a lot of the material is channeled at our white colleagues. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
yeah.
I mean, what do you think about that? And again, I'll take some comments from you, Paula, and from you, Cassia, because you must have been in that situation, both of you.
Yeah. Yes. Do you want me to go first? Or do you want to go
yes, please.
first,
Yes,
Cassia?
please. Oh, right. Cassia, do you want to go first, or?
Yeah, I could go first. Yeah. I've definitely been in that situation, probably 99.9% of the time. The dynamic, I think, is me over explaining and focusing on disclosure of people in that group who are Black.
Mm.
And there's a lot of focus on allyship. And at times, I think those spaces have felt quite tokenistic, a bit of a tick box in line with the mission statement. And then we get to the end and everyone goes, oh, that must be terrible for you. I feel so sorry for you. And then we move on and go and have a coffee or what have you. And I think it's difficult because you're the minority. So it's difficult for things to be centered on you because you're outnumbered. So I think for me, that was one of the most powerful, and initially, if I'm honest, quite uncomfortable things about being part of the EEC, almost like the mirror flipping back onto me for the first time ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm centered at with the conversation, as opposed to my purpose is to educate the person next to me, which is the role that I'm used to being in. Yeah, I think I was watching a video on YouTube. I think it was by Cheryl Grills from the Association of Black Psychologists in America.
Mm-hmm.
And she was talking about the EEC spaces. And she asked the group members when they first knew they were Black. And I remember driving home and I was thinking about this over and over and over again. And I thought, why has this never occurred to me? Why have I never thought about this before? But we've had so many workshops and discussions about anti-racism, but it hasn't really ever been about me.
That's right.
And I think that really struck me. Not saying, I don't want to give the impression though that at times it hasn't been a beneficial space. I think I'm just trying to get across that I haven't been centered in that space. Yeah,
I mean, I absolutely understand that, and I think Paula, you can make your observations or share your feelings, but this is again something about our lived experience as Black people, and it's an area I'm very interested in, because I do feel that we need our safe spaces to explore some of these issues in more depth, because it isn't just about the development of our white colleagues. It's also about our development and our healing and our thriving. But Paula, what are your thoughts and observations about that?
Okay, I'm going to come with my positioning as a Black woman.
Sure.
And then I'll talk about being in spaces with Black colleagues. I was fortunate, and I look at it as a huge blessing now. At the time, I didn't. I thought it was, difficult. But at the age of 13, my parents took me back to the Caribbean, and I finished my secondary school education. So from 13 to 18, I was in St. Lucia. And
another one.
Sorry?
Another one.
Another one. That was the making of me in terms of my Black identity. It grounded me in terms of who I was. I think I got to understand my parents a bit more.
Yes.
And why they would never allow us to go in the water when we went to Blackpool or Margate. It's like, no, don't go in that dirty water. I didn't get what they were. I didn't get their mentality until I went to St. Lucia, and I was like, oh yeah, it is in their eyes very dirty water. And not a place you should be swimming in. But it's the idea that I had Black teachers, Black professionals around me. The expectation was that I would do well, especially because I came from England, and I was being pushed and pushed and pushed to be the best me I could be. And this is all by Black people.
Okay.
And so when I came back to the UK, because I was born in the UK, left and came back. When I came back to the UK, I was very aware of my St. Lucian heritage. And I also expected more of myself. And I in terms of what I could do, what I could be, what I wanted to do. And I think my aspirations were quite high, I guess, in comparison to my counterparts who were here and kind of born and bred. It's not that they weren't ambitious, they were, but I think I was kind of like hungrier. Maybe that's the better word to describe. I was hungrier. I felt that I had to do well. I felt that, you know, having all these resources to, at that time, it was a free first degree. I mean, my local authority paid for my first degree, and it's unheard of now, but at that time it was like, how can I pass this by? I have to do well as a Black woman. So I was very, very aware of that, and I took every opportunity. I pushed my way through, and so I had an internal sense of life is going to be difficult for me. I know, and I've experienced the contrast in different societies, and I just have to push my way through this, any obstacle. So the idea of, also I did West Indian history. I did at O level. I knew I was from Africa. There was no debate about that. I was part of the African diaspora. And I guess part of my coming or being in this country was that being with some colleagues who were even disputing that they were from Africa, that they had that heritage. I'm like, what are you talking about? We're all from Africa. This is where we all come from. And that knowledge of kind of knowing who you are, and the idea that somehow I guess having white allies is important, but having a united, I guess, group of Black allies in terms of, for your healing, for your grounding, is to me more important.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of healing to take place. A lot of things have happened and are still happening to us as people from the African diaspora. And it's not because you're a bad person, it's simply because of your skin color, and that is not okay. And the denial of somehow, you know, things are happening, maybe because people are bad people, or they're not kind of integrating enough into the system, and that there's opportunities for everyone, and that equality exists. I'm not saying there aren't pockets of that. I believe there are, but the idea that there is equity for everyone is not my reality. And I kind of, when I'm with colleagues who don't believe racism exists, or they believe it's on a much lower level to what it is, and they are of the same African ancestry as me, I do kind of, I do kind of acknowledge their experience, but there's something going on, I believe, internally about not seeing difficulties. It's hard to see what's in front of your face if you're calling it something else. It's that idea of gestalt. What are you seeing? What are you seeing? In sometimes the image of the two faces facing each other and the candlestick in the middle. Are you seeing the background? Are you seeing the foreground? Are you seeing the whole picture? And I think as Black people, sometimes, depending on your experiences, it's hard to see the whole picture. It's a painful picture to feel that you can be discriminated against because of the color of your skin. But it's,
and you know, I think we absolutely, I guess, would all agree that we do suffer from some level of internalized racism.
And that's the word I didn't use, but absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think we do. So thank you both for sharing something of your sort of personal kind of lived experiences and perspectives, and what informs that. And I think it's that sort of context, because we're all come from similar but different places.
Yeah.
So then we have the formation of EECs. Tell us, Paula, why were they deemed necessary, and how do they work?
Okay. It's an 8-week program. So for 8 weeks, 2 hours of your time, there are 7 keys, and they are specifically focusing on African wisdom or African truths. So in each key, there's also what we call a toolkit exercise, which is about acknowledging and dealing with stress. And it could be about deep breathing. It really is allowing us to think about ourselves for those 2 hours, not necessarily just focusing on work or home. It's about bringing your whole self. So it really is to think about you as a Black woman, a Black man at work, a mother, a father, I guess a hard worker, and bringing your whole self into the session and being with colleagues and allies who are experiencing exactly the same thing as you, and speaking your truth. So it's an empowering space. I experienced it as that. I didn't know what to expect when I attended. I thought, what is this? I'll see what it is. By attending, I went with an open mind, and I thought, I hope it's not one of these groups where people are just talking about their problems all the time, because I got enough of my own. So that was my first thought. But it isn't that at all, actually. It's quite a unique space. And I certainly haven't experienced that type of thinking space, feeling space, open expression space in work. These conversations I would be having with my friends and my loved ones. I wouldn't be having these conversations in work because it's just not safe enough. So that was my experience of EECs, and I thought everyone needs to experience this, because the level of empowerment that I got from that space has led me to becoming the EEC lead. For me, it was a real purposeful time. And, maybe it was just the culmination, right time, right space for me. And it led me into being more purposeful as a clinician. It's like, if I'm here to do something meaningful, this is part of what I would like to be doing. And I don't think my work is not meaningful, but I wanted to be part of EECs, to be, as a Black woman, as effective as I can. And I think this is part of the journey.
Okay, thanks for that. And I hear you. It resonates a lot with some of the thoughts I've been having. And I've just become involved in not an EEC, but a safe space, predominantly for Black and brown women to share some of their experiences, and perhaps the EEC model might be something that we might adopt in the future, in terms of giving people space and them leaving with stuff that's great in terms of what you just shared. Cassia, what do you think your role is going to be? Have you been a member of one of these groups, or are you lining up to perhaps facilitate? What's your role going to be?
Yeah, so initially, before you can be a facilitator, you have to be a participant.
Okay.
So you have to attend all the keys, all the sessions, just as a group member.
Yeah.
And then I had a bit of a gap to take some time to reflect on that, because I think it is a different dynamic being
Mm-hmm.
part of the group as a participant as opposed to facilitating it. And then you attend a 2-day training, teaching for how to facilitate EEC,
Okay.
followed by a graduation ceremony that I haven't had mine yet. But I'm looking forward to that because it was an amazing experience. Like, even being a participant, but the teaching as well, there is a bond that is formed with the other group members.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very different experience for me compared to the teaching that I usually have at university.
Sure.
So there was laughter, there
Yeah.
was tears, there was passion, there was dancing, and some real proper dancing as well. Not just like dancing like I'm at work, dancing where you forget that you're at work type of dancing.
Dancing like nobody's watching.
That type of dancing. Yeah, and I remember when I returned to uni and I was beaming and everyone was like, what's this EEC thing that you were doing? And there was part of me that didn't really want to say too much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes from maybe a bit of experiences of cultural appropriation, the historical context of colonialism, and just when something's good, it kind of being taken away and reformed, and the essence is taken out of it. So I felt the need to kind of protect it and not really say too much, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But I think for me, I've had role models within the profession, like there is a clinical psychologist called Jelaine, and she has been a huge role model for me. She's done a lot of anti-racism work before it was fashionable to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And back when there was a lot of resistance and hostility.
Yeah.
Those days. And
The bad old days of the 80s, yeah.
yeah, she was a forerunner, and I just thought, wow, this woman is amazing. But I think you can have role models, but then still you're not sure the type of clinician you want to be. Like, people talk about community psychology and you think, but really, what is that? What would I actually be doing? And I think for me, the EEC has helped me. It's reminded me why I started this journey, because it is a long journey, but then also helped shape me into thinking about the type of psychologist I want to be, which sometimes I can forget among the chaos of it all. I can sometimes just forget. It's like a roadmap for me.
And I mean, I mean, the training thing in itself is a bit of a roller coaster. And quite often it's only sadly when we've gone through it that we can recalibrate ourselves and think, well, okay, what is my positioning? Who am I? Because we can get lost. Absolutely get lost in it. So I hear you, definitely.
You can also sometimes be, if it's okay to say this, it might be a bit controversial, but sometimes you can be kind of seduced by the performatism of kind of being the person that people want you to be, but it's not authentic to your community. If it's okay to say that.
Absolutely. You can say what you like.
You're the poster girl, but you're not really, doing the work. And that can be the easier option sometimes, because one of my external research supervisors, Dawn Edge, who is also a phenomenal person in clinical psychology. She's a professor at Manchester University. huge role model of mine. And she has spoken about in previous podcasts the extra work, you know, that's involved with being, so at the moment, me as a trainee and assignments, exams and everything else, but still having to advocate can take a toll on you.
Yes.
As a clinician. Yeah, it can.
Mm.
Sorry, I think I've gone way off track.
Well, let's get back on track, because in a way, what you both have shared is something of being participants in EECs, and what it's left you with, what it's given you, what it's made you think about, and I think that's important. But to get back to EECs, I just wanted to, we're moving towards the end of the podcast, unfortunately. But Paula, what I mean, have you facilitated any groups yet? And what are the sort of themes that have been emerging, if you were to think about one or two?
One of the key things that happens in EECs, it reminds people of who they are. So it's reminding them that you have to work on building that positive sense of race and identity, because it gets chipped away, it gets eroded in the onslaught of everyday life and trying to fit into you're a circle and you're being put into a square, and you don't always fit, and that erosion actually makes you feel less and less connected. And EECs can be incredibly powerful to reconnect people to their African ancestry, their Blackness. And it sounds like, it's so important, because that is a part of who you are. And that's also what people see. They see a Black woman, they see a Black man, and that is often the part that I guess gets attacked. So we have to nourish that part of ourselves. So
no, thanks for that. I think this whole sort of sense of healing, because of the impact of racism and living in societies like this, is so important, and shouldn't get sidelined for the work that white folk have to do, because I want to see these things happen in parallel. And I think those of us who are able we're the ones, I guess, who we're going to ensure that happens as much as we can. Can I just ask, in terms of the EEC that you're involved in, is it workplace based, or how does it work? Who joins them?
So as I said, Malcolm Phillips, who is the UK link for the Association of Black Psychologists, so he's a psychologist himself, and he's the lead for the branch in the UK. And Malcolm Phillips has done some work with Black Thrive to provide EECs in the community, and that was in Lambeth. So that was almost like a pilot study. And out of that, links were made with SLAM, and SLAM then adopted EECs. We had to, of course, do a bid, etc. And
Paula, before you carry on, what does SLAM mean for those of our listeners who don't know the acronyms?
I'm sorry, South London and Maudsley NHS Trust. So it's a mental health trust in South London.
Thank you.
So a bid was made, and now EECs are part of the staff offer, part of staff support for Black staff. So if you're feeling like you need some extra support, it's something that you have access to, which in my day, when I was first starting, like Cassia, as a counselling psychologist in the NHS, That was unheard of.
Mm,
So time has moved on, but we need it. We so
sure.
need it.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a staff support offer at this particular point in time.
Yes,
Okay, and predominantly aimed at Black staff.
yes. And Black Thrive in Lambeth offer it as community support. So,
Okay.
but you would have to, of course, travel to that location, etc., etc. But also, Keeping Well in Southeast London are offering, part of the work we're doing is to offer an online space for EECs,
Okay.
for
Okay.
people that have done it. So there'll be ongoing links with people who have done EECs to form a community.
Okay, and you can see this thing spreading and
Absolutely. Different NHS trusts are interested in taking it up as part of their staff support.
good.
Yeah, so discussions are being had about how did you do this? We want it too, which is good. Yeah, we're glad that we can be that maybe part of you know, the pioneers for EEC in NHS settings, and also social care as well.
Yes, absolutely. So if our listeners wanted to find out more about the program, where would you signpost them to?
Let me just clarify the link.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So as we wrap up, it's been really, really interesting. Yeah. Is there anything else that any final words you'd like to share with us, or final thoughts rather that you'd like to share with us? Let's go to Cassia. She hasn't spoken for a while. Any final thoughts, Cassia?
I think the only other thing I wanted to stress in terms of the EEC that maybe we didn't cover that much is the spiritual connection that you have.
We didn't.
That it's incredibly powerful. And the only other thing that's come close to that for me is prayer and singing at church, where you kind of feel that kind of spiritual connection, but to stress that it's regardless of religious background or spiritual belief. And that's what I really, really like about the EEC. It's literally for everybody, regardless of what kind of religious belief you have. But also that it can be really beneficial in your clinical practice for your one-to-one work as a clinician, in terms of your formulations, thinking about legacy, strength-based assessments, and one-to-one work. It's really made a big impression on just my approach to working with clients as well.
Okay. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. Any final thoughts from you, Paula, before we wrap up?
Yeah, just the in addition to that, there is there's something about getting Black people together, that when we come together, we are just dynamite. There is such power in unity, and the conversations and the energy and the spirit of the conversations are second to none. You cannot fabricate this, and you can't manufacture it. I think it's just something that happens when we come together. There is such energy, such love, and that comes out in just the uniqueness of our personalities. So there is a lot of laughter, there's a lot of dancing, there's a lot of jokes, and it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful, empowering space.
Well, I mean, I love all that, and I think to a large extent that's what's probably helped us to survive and helped us to continue to survive.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ladies, for sharing this morning. And I know we could have gone on for a lot longer. And perhaps at some subsequent time, we may have a part 2 to sort of, again, shoot the breeze about what the impact of this kind of work is having on self as well as the community. So thank you so much.
Yes.
And yeah, see you all soon.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Sylvia.
My pleasure.
you.
Absolutely.